So, welcome to another session of the Mother Talks. We are joined by lovely Sian from Relaxed Kids, who is going to be talking about her journey of adoption and her journey into her career after she adopted her son. Hi, my lovely.
Hello.
Just to start, really. It would be great to know how you got to the point that adoption was an option for you as a family.
Sure. So for me personally, adoption was something that I wanted to do regardless of whether I had a child naturally or not. For my husband, the situation was slightly differently. And I think this is the situation for a lot of men, is that they want their own child. They want a child that is theirs biologically, physically. So as soon as we got married, which was, 12, 13 years ago, we started trying to conceive very casually at the beginning, not really tracking any sort of cycles or anything like that. It didn't happen for a year or two. So we went to the doctors, had every test that you can imagine before we went any further with the IVF journey, and we literally, there was nothing wrong with us. There were no problems. I was ovulating well. My husband's count was fine, which I'm sure he'll be happy for me to tell everybody. It was above average. And so the time scales, this is going back a few years now, so it may be slightly differently now for anybody on their IVF journey, but the time scales that we tried for long enough that they wanted to put us onto the IVF journey. I took some Clomid to make me ovulate more than I was supposed to. That all worked, that was fine, but we still didn't conceive. So we then went to Salisbury and started our IVF journey. If anybody has had IVF, you probably understand about the injections, and you've basically got to stimulate your body to overproduce lots and lots of eggs, which then you have an operation afterwards to have them taken out. So physically, I had to go through the menopause 3 times.
Wow.
Which is really hard in itself, whilst you're trying to also have a baby. And the first time they created some embryos. Our embryos were A grade. We donated some of them to science as well, because they were such a good grade of embryo. So everything was looking really good for us. My womb lining was looking great. They implanted the first embryo, and within, I think, 48 hours, it was unsuccessful, which is quite unusual. It was really, really quick. So we knew that I wasn't pregnant straight away. We went through the process again twice. So we had one fresh round, one frozen round, another fresh round, and I was done by the 3rd one.
You've condensed that down, but I can't even start to imagine how that takes a toll on you physically and emotionally.
My gosh, I put on weight a lot. I went through the menopause, which is always really fun. And then what they were trying to do is to give me extra boosts of progesterone. So my husband then had to inject me with that, which he found really hard, because he was hurting me, and we'd get it wrong, and I was already injecting myself a lot. So you're on a really strict timetable as well. Your whole life is planned out for like 12 weeks. You know exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen, and you are just consumed by it your whole life.
I think,
and
by the sounds of it, you almost have to become, like, it has to take over and continue for it to even
100%. And anybody that knows me knows that I'm a really social person, and me and my husband love to, we used to, before our son came along, go out a lot and eat out, party, and your whole life just becomes about this. But you're okay with that, because at the end you presume that you're going to have a child. But by the 3rd round, I was done with it. And we had another round of IVF that we were entitled to, and I just said, no, I don't think I can do it anymore. And I wanted a break. And initially I said a break. My husband was like, it's fine, this is hard. And I can see that you're really struggling with it. And during that break was when I started introducing the idea of adoption. And my husband wasn't really into it. And I definitely think if you're on an adoption journey, I don't think there's any way you can persuade somebody
Yeah.
to want to adopt. I think it's something that has to come really naturally to you. And I say naturally, it has to come to you in a way that isn't forced. So if you are up for adoption and your partner isn't, however many books or programs or whatever you look into, websites, whatever, put a small child's face in front of them, they have to be ready for it. So I think we waited after our last round of IVF for me to even really discuss it another 6 months. And I brought it up again and said, what do you think about adoption? And instantly he said, yeah, let's go to a meeting. Let's just see what it's all about. So we went to a meeting with Dorset County Council. So we went through the local authority with our adoption, and we sat down and there was an adopter there. And I would say, if you're going to adopt, talk to other adopters, because it's the best way to get a real good overall picture of what to expect. We had that first initial meeting, and that's where they kind of say, if you want to go further, you can sign some forms and then we'll kind of start having initial meetings with you. And I'd say half the room said no, they didn't want to go any further, which is, fine. They got the information that they needed and they knew that it wasn't for them. And I think some of the things that put people off at the beginning is the unknown, is that you have no idea. You can do every background check into this child, you can speak to their foster carers, you can look at their medical records, but there's no guarantee how this is going to pan out. And I think if a lot of the people that didn't want to adopt were parents already that had biological children, and I think that's fair. You're introducing a child into your home that you really don't know how this is going to pan out, and they need so much attention and love that it's going to be difficult.
Looking back, do you think that kind of that first initial meeting to go and find out about adoption, do you think it's a true representation of kind of the journey ahead of you?
I don't think you ever get the true representation until that child is in your home, 100%. I don't want to say that we're desperate for adopters in this country, but there is a shortage of adopters in this country. And I think when you go to these meetings, is that you do get given a nice view of how you can help a child on their journey. And speaking to other adopters that's why I say that's the best thing to do, because the social workers, their jobs are to make sure that these children have loving homes. And sometimes getting that loving home, if you tell everyone everything that could happen potentially with an adoption, then I don't think you'd have many adopters. To be perfectly honest, and I'm very frank and honest about this because I've been through this, and my son's actually was adopted previous to us adopting him.
Wow.
So he was already placed with a family, and after 4 weeks the adoption broke down, which is something that you never really hear of, adopters adopting. And that's why the court orders don't happen straight away. The court orders happen months down the line. So a child doesn't get placed in your home and then they're yours. For us, it took 12 months until my son's name even changed.
So is that because, is that just a paperwork thing, or is that just because it gives the opportunity if things aren't working out? Like
it's a mixture. It's a mixture, because the courts are closed for the summer. They close for Christmas. They don't work on a child schedule, they work on their own schedule. Also, the parents can contest to the adoption. It's quite normal for a biological parent to contest. And in some ways you almost want them to, so that the child knows later on, if they look at their paperwork, that their biological parents did try as much as they could in the situation they were in to say I love you and I would love you to live with me even if it's not the best circumstance. And also, especially with our son, because he'd had an adoption breakdown previously, they wanted to check that wasn't going to happen again. So that's why it took 12 months. They wanted to check that we were the right family.
So when kind of did you get the opportunity to talk about, or when did you decide that adopting an older child was going to be what you wanted to do, rather than, because we mentioned this before when we've talked, adopting a baby, a lot of people think that's the ideal. So when did that kind of shift for you?
Well, we actually looked into something called foster to adopt, which is what is very common now when it comes to adopting babies. So you foster the baby initially, and it means that the baby can come to you a lot quicker, but it does mean that the chances of that baby then being placed somewhere else are quite high as well. So we did that course, and we were like, well, we're not quite sure whether we'd want to build, because we weren't in a fostering position at that point. We wanted to adopt, whether we wanted to run the risk of having that uncertainty. But during our stage 1 training, you have stage 1, stage 2 training that you go through, which is quite intense. You have to travel, it's whole weekends of training. You have NSPCC training, safeguarding training, speak to other adopters. And during that, they had some magazines out on a table. And I think the magazine, I don't think they have the magazine anymore, it's all online, but the magazine at the time, I think it was called Children Who Wait. And it was a magazine of children who are waiting for adoption. They are what are classed as hard to place children, normally siblings, normally older children, and normally children that maybe have some type of physical disability. So a lot of them did have fetal alcohol syndrome disorder, which is something that doesn't always get diagnosed until the child is a bit older as well. And I took the magazine home after one of our training days, and I was looking through, and there were all these boys, and there were all these boys that were 4, 5, 6 years old, and siblings as well. And I was like, and you can choose, you can say what your preference is. So you can say, I'd like a girl who's aged between 18 months and 4. It's very unusual that you would get a child that's a girl who's between, or even a baby, because everybody wants a girl and everybody wants a young girl, because the belief is that a young child isn't as affected by trauma or abuse or attachment issues.
I mean, from my point of view, though, obviously my qualifications being in brain development from fetal up until 2 or 3 years.
Oh, you'll know all about the...
I would have to disagree with that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I can see that where that is a logical thinking from people if they haven't kind of got that knowledge. Because obviously, like, I'm aware that in the first 2 years, all the emotional connections for the rest of your life are made. So.
Yeah. And during the training, the adoption training, which is run by social services, they do explain this. So they did talk about the high levels of cortisol that the mother can produce if she's in an abusive or domestic violence situation. Obviously, the drug and alcohol issues, the transference there. So we learn all about this, but also, you know, and it's personal choice and personal preference. And it sounds odd saying personal preference when it comes to a child, but for us, that really opened our eyes. And we said, you know, particularly with boys, the chance of them being in foster care until they're too old to be in foster care, and then they're just kind of left to, there's some really great post fostering care services now for young adults, so they have that transition to go from a foster home to kind of being more independent. But when you look statistically at the high chance of suicide, drug abuse, homelessness within that category of boys that are fostered and then not adopted, for us it was a no-brainer. We wanted to go for an older child. So yeah, we totally changed our mind from applying to where we then were during our training. Our ideas completely changed.
And I suppose that's why you do all of the training, and that's why you spend the time going to these, you know, weekends and meeting these adopters and reading those articles, because parenting is never kind of what you think it's going to be, and that's really the start of your parenting journey, isn't it?
Exactly. And parenting a child that has been traumatized, abused, neglected, and also will have some type of attachment issues, is a very different style of parenting. And that's why you almost, when you go through the training process, I actually really enjoyed it because I'm a learner. So I love learning new things. I'm always doing a course. I'm always like adding to my skill set. And for me, this was like, wow, I'm learning so much here. For others, it was a lot. It's a lot to take in because you are having to hear the worst case scenarios. And the adopters that came in were amazing, and they were really honest and they were really brutal. And they told you, you know, the worst case scenarios about what had happened, because parenting an abused child is very different to parenting a biological child. You don't know what you're going to get with a biological child either. You know, there are so many different things that can happen. But if you are parenting an adopted child, the chances of them needing a different type of parenting is almost 100%. So the training is really intense. It's quite brutal. It's long. It's hard. It's emotional. And also, that's where you kind of decide whether adopting is for you as well, because the commitment that you have to make to the training is the commitment that you're going to have to make to that child for the rest of your life. So the training, I would say, be prepared for it to be long and for it to be tiring, but it is amazing. You learn so much from that. And I mean, we weren't even, so you have to go to something called panel, which is where you become an approved adopter. So you literally sit, it's almost like a mini courtroom, and you have about, I think there were about 10 on our panel. So you have some adopters, some people from social services, some people from the community, and they ask you lots and lots of questions. So before the panel happens, you have to provide financial proof that you can take at least a year off to be with this child, one of you. We had to have references from, I think we had 2 friend references, and they had to be written and they had to be spoken to on the phone as well, all met. Both sets of parents, all of our siblings, work references. So I had to be really on. I was very lucky at the time. I was working for somebody I knew who's a very good friend of mine, who was also my friend reference. So you have to tell work what your plan is, even if you're not even matched with the child. So there's a lot of paperwork we had to write. I cannot remember how many words it was. I want to say it's around a 5,000 word essay, but it's literally about your life from when you were a child up until now, your values, how you were parented, what you would change about the parenting that you had, how you're similar to your partner, how you're different, things you agree and disagree on, your hobbies, what makes you a good, it's very, very intrusive.
I was going to say, that feels like just bearing everything.
Yes.
You have to be so committed at that point, don't you? Like you've gone through that, the training, but then being that committed to just bear your whole life for judgment. And to judge what your future's going to hold.
And your social worker literally becomes like a part of the family because they're at your house all the time. And you have to have safety checks on your house too, health and safety, and also they have to get in touch with a previous partner. So my ex-boyfriend had to be contacted, and they had to get a reference from him. My husband's ex-partner had to be contacted. So it's really, and so people that you didn't really want to know about your journey have to know about it for you to, but it's kind of one of those things you go for. If I'm miscommitted to it, what they have to do with the partner thing, just to make it really clear, is that they have to make sure that there was no domestic violence on your part during the relationship. And if there were children, which there were with my ex-partner, not my children but his children, that the relationship I had with them, and actually I've still got a relationship with them, which is fantastic. So in the end it all worked out well, but it's very odd and very and people say, why do they have to? They shouldn't have to. It's like, well, who knows, and you could be a completely different person now to what you were then. But it's just that's why I'm very brutally honest about the process, is that it's not as easy as people think. Deciding to adopt, and then the hard part is waiting for a child. The hard part
is going through
before that. Have a break afterwards if you can. Because it is quite brutal.
On holiday or something before you get thrown into
I would suggest doing that. And then once you go to panel, they approve you as an adopter, and then you have to go to another panel once you're matched with a child. So we were actually shown the profile of our son before we were even approved adopters, because he was 6. He'd been adopted previously. He was living on a farm at the time. His foster carers were living on a farm. My husband used to live on a farm. He's very outdoors. He needed a lot of people with a lot of energy, which we had at the time. I wouldn't say I have a lot of energy now.
That's motherhood though, hey?
Yeah, I know. So we actually had a couple of bump-in play dates with him. So you do that, and that's quite common actually, is where you go to a park or you go to a play area. And we took one of my friend's little girls with us, and he's actually really good friends with her now. They can't remember it. It's very strange. And we saw him playing, and he was with his foster brothers and sisters, and we were with him for about 2 hours, and we left, and then we had another meet as well before we decided whether we wanted to go ahead. But I was done as soon as I saw him the first time. That was it. And as soon as I saw his profile, I was like, this is it. This is the boy that we, want to give a home to. My husband's a lot more sensible and takes his time over things, and likes to, I go with my gut, he goes with the practicalities. And he had the same concerns as probably everybody else does. He's older, he remembers more, he's got his own personality, all these things that go through your head when you're adopting an older child, which are completely normal. And our family had the same concerns. You're not going to be able to change him. He's already, he can remember everything that's happened. And what I will say is that even as adults, we're constantly developing and changing and improving ourselves. And if we can do that as adults, a 6-year-old can 100% be helped and nurtured with the right type of parenting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we went to matching panel. We got matched with him, and then we did introductions. So they don't just move into your home. You do introductions, and we did it for 6 weeks, which isn't normal. You normally just do it for a couple of weeks, just because of the situation that had happened previously. They wanted to make sure we were still okay with it and that we were coping, and that was fine.
So from very first going to that very first meeting with the council to getting to the point of the introduction and then him moving in, how long was that process in total?
13 months.
Wow.
Which is actually
intense. A lot is in 13 months.
That's quite unusual, and it's to do with timing. We were lucky in some ways that we'd went to the meeting, I think it was around May June time, the first meeting, and then the first training course started like the September, and then the second course was straight afterwards, and then our panel got booked for February, and we'd already seen the profile in the December, and then the next matching panel. It's a lot of people get frustrated with the adoption process because you are bound by deadlines that social services set. Social services, it sounds awful, but they're not, the deadlines they're setting aren't for the children. The deadlines that they're setting are for what they can achieve. So our son, we'd already seen his profile in December, and he still had another 6 to 7 months in foster care before he came to us. Now, because he was older, we couldn't do the foster to adopt. That wasn't usual at the time to do that. That's something now I think they would do, because he had another 6 months of living in foster care. He was safe, he was being fed, he was fine. I'm not quite sure that emotionally he was maybe getting what he needed. He was where he needed to be at that time. We could have maybe have given him a bit more in that 6 months, but because of admin, it didn't happen. So we were actually, ours was really quick. And I know, people that have waited much longer, and it's taken much longer because their training dates have changed, and you're all prepared to do it, and then the training date gets changed, and you can see things moving on another 6 months and then another 6 months. So just be prepared if you are looking to adopt, that don't have a timeline. Just don't have one. You have got to literally take each day as it comes, and then once that child moves in with you, that's the beginning. A lot of people, especially those that don't adopt, and it's no fault of theirs, if you haven't done it, you haven't done it, but that's not where the journey ends. That's just where it begins. So actually enjoy that process beforehand, because things then get way more intense.
But don't you think that's just parenting as a whole?
Yeah. Well, and your lives literally are turned upside down. We'd never had the biological child we'd had time to prepare, like you have 9 months to prepare when you're pregnant. We'd had that time to prepare, but we weren't prepared. So naturally, when you have a child, naturally you expect them to be feeding in some way, either breastfed or bottle, and you know that this is the stage that's going to happen here. And then you have a weaning stage, you have a toilet training stage. It's different for everyone, I know that. But when you have a child that moves into, they're a mini adult, they're a mini human that can walk, talk, have their own opinions, walk into your house. You have what's almost called a honeymoon period. So when they first move in, they're very compliant and very good. And you go, wow, we have nailed this. This is really good. They're so well behaved. And everyone's like, how's it going? You're like, brilliant. Amazing. They sleep through the night. They're eating everything I'm putting in front of them. What actually happens is that child goes into shock. So they are completely traumatized by moving into a home. We didn't get called mummy and daddy for a long time. We were just called by our first names, because our son didn't know whether he was staying with us or not. He had no idea. So he was very shocked. He was very compliant. He was very well behaved. And then that's when we saw the traumatized behaviors manifest. So he was very, very violent. We put up with a lot of physical abuse I say abuse, but outlet. He would attack us because he had no way of dealing with the emotions that he had. So he'd been cared and looked after, so that all his basic functions, like having a bath, toilet, feeding, sleeping, they were all looked after. But for 2 years, after 4 years in an abusive home, for 2 years he was then in foster care and also being adopted. He'd never really been parented. So we almost had to start from the beginning. He was still in pull-ups at 6 years old, and only a year ago came out of them. He's now 10, which for us, we're like, yes, oh my God, no more pull-ups. And for us, a 9-year-old in pull-ups was quite normal. And it sounds very odd, but when he was being toilet trained, a lot of trauma happened in his life. So he never got that function. Eating is still an issue for us. Meal times, he still eats very, very slowly. If we go out to a pub or a restaurant, he can barely eat because of loud noises. So that reminds him of what happened at home. Wetting the bed is still something, and toilet is still something that we struggle with. But those seemed like small things compared to the violence that we were experiencing. And it was like his personality would change. And it was when he was frightened or scared or wasn't quite sure of the situation or what was happening. And many times I had to call my husband home from work to come and help me because I was being dragged around by my hair. And what happened then is I started looking into different types of parenting, because obviously the way that I was brought up and the way that I was parented was amazing and fantastic, and I had a really good childhood, but it wasn't going to work with my son. Punishments did not work. Taking things away did not work. He had such a shame complex. He just felt so shit about himself.
More.
Yeah. And we tried a chart. Somebody suggested a chart. It came down in 2 days. It was the worst thing, because as soon as we took stars off or put things on, he just felt really rubbish about himself. He felt awful. He was like, I obviously can't do anything right, and I can't see any stars up there. So we just totally just left that. So I looked into therapeutic parenting, which is amazing, by the way, even if you aren't parenting an adopted or fostered child. And Sarah Nash is the lady who runs it. She's a foster carer and adopter herself. And therapeutic parenting is about teaching children natural consequences. So consequences for their actions that to you, a lot of people say you let him get away with murder. It's like, I'm just teaching his brain in a different way. We need to change those neural pathways, because you can literally change your brain, and we were trying to change.
Time.
It takes a long time. So I looked at therapeutic parenting, changing the way I spoke to him as well, using more positive words instead of negative, gentle parenting, natural parenting. And I was very overwhelmed by all of it. And I just took bits from each one that I thought worked. And actually we went back to basics and would wrap him up in a towel after he had a bath, eye contact, face paint so that he could kind of see me face to face, cleaning his teeth for him, laying in bed with him, hugging him if he wanted to, and just doing all those things. And they talk a lot in the adoption training about stages, not ages. So what stage is your child in? And he was still in an emotional state when he was having tantrums of a 3-year-old. He was 6, but his tantrums were of a 3-year-old. So physically, so a 3-year-old, actually, you're quite used to a 3-year-old throwing stuff around, maybe going on the floor, banging their feet, maybe even hitting you accidentally, their arms flinging. When they're 6, that comes across as them being a really angry, violent child, but actually he was a toddler in that way. So we started to understand that more and really kind of get, right, okay, we need to nurture him in a way that maybe he wasn't nurtured. So we went back to pull-ups. We didn't even do toilet training till last year. I think we left it for 2-3 years before we even looked at it. So we left that. We didn't want any shame attached with his toilet training or issues. We did a lot of nurturing. And then I've always been very holistic. I've worked in the corporate world for a really long time. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a hippie at heart. Meditation, breathing exercises, love a bit of yoga. And I was really finding it hard working and the stress of the corporate world and parenting a child that was traumatized, which is very difficult. So I would say I had post-adoption depression. It's not very talked about, and it's something I talk about with adopters a lot now. You do get depressed afterwards because you feel like you're on your own. You just feel like nobody and you should be happy and elated that you've got this child, and actually you're like
for and work so hard.
Yes.
You
should have. And people say, did you feel that instant love and connection? It's like, I thought he was really cute, I really did, but that love grows.
Well, I struggle with this a little bit anyway, when I think, even when people talk about it, when you're giving birth to a baby, that did you feel that rush of love and bonding? I really try, and especially my prenatal stuff, and in your case I would say the exact same to you in your pre-adoption thing, is that bonding is not an event. It's a journey, and there's like this expectation that you should know everything about your child. And actually we're just learning. And the more things that you do, so things like eye contact and all the things you were describing, regardless of an age of a child, is what you're doing is you're connecting to them on a level that you're picking up their non-verbal cues. Because especially when we think about like emotional connections in the brain, if he can't verbalize like how he's feeling, then you need to be able to see those, and those are the things that help. So I struggle when people say this, whether it's adoption or having a biological child, it's not an event, it's never an event. And if someone tells you it is, they're lying.
No, I completely agree. And this is, a lot of people think it's that gratefulness, like you should be grateful you've got your child now. And so I used to hide a lot of my emotions and say, well, actually I'm really lucky that we've adopted. It happened quite quickly for us. We've got a beautiful child. He's very, very handsome, and he was luckily, because he was a terror when he first came. So I used to go, oh, he's got a beautiful face, he's got a beautiful face, it's fine. And you kind of feel really ungrateful that you're not enjoying the experience. And I would say my first year of him being with us was a blur. I can't really remember it. And I speak to a lot of people who have had children naturally, who have had postnatal depression, that they've said very similar. They can't remember a lot of the time because it was quite traumatic and emotional for them. They can't really remember. And I can remember bits, and I now see photos and I'm like, oh yeah, we did that. I can remember it being quite hard and quite difficult. So I was working in a corporate job. My boss was great and I worked quite flexible hours, but I did go out to an office and work, and it was really difficult dealing with a traumatized child and stress at work as well. And I started looking into other things that maybe I could do that would fit in better with my son, that wasn't as stressful. And that's when, and I always think the universe works in amazing ways. And something popped up on, I think it was on Facebook, about Relaxed Kids. And Relaxed Kids, anybody that comes to my sessions or knows anything about my sessions, works on a 7-step system whereby you actually get the children quite worked up at the beginning. So it's quite funny when I go into schools and they think I'm doing Relaxed Kids. For the first 20 minutes, the kids are running around making loads of noise. And they're really hot and sweaty. And they're like, I thought this was relaxing. But what we need to teach children is that when their heart is beating or when they're breathing really fast, that can be excitedness, it could be anger, it could be anxiety, frustration, it could be a range of emotions. We need to simulate that within the sessions, and then what we do is we teach them to come down from that level. So I learned a lot about a child's brain whilst working on Relaxed Kids and training, about the amygdala, and how really to calm the amygdala down takes a while to do, and until the amygdala is calm, the learning part of the brain can't really kick in. So trying to teach a child, I was saying to my son, like, calm down, breathe, blah blah blah, whilst he was up here. Actually he physically couldn't understand that. His learning brain wasn't engaged. So I could say it 10 million times, it made no difference. I needed to physically teach him how to be from up here and to come down. So I get them all riled up and I get them excited. And then I learned about relaxing the body physically. So the 7-step system, then I teach stretches. It's children's yoga. I don't claim to be a yoga teacher. I'm not that flexible at all. But I teach them stretches to relax their body and to start understanding how their body moves, starting to understand how it feels. Feeling your body and the emotions in your body is so important, and that's what he wasn't really getting. He was probably feeling anxious, it came out as anger. He was probably feeling really scared, it came out as anger, and it was all being held up in here. So to release that tension with stretches, and then combining that with breathing exercises as well. And breathing, I would say, is the core of getting any child relaxed or adult relaxed, you know. So we use breath a lot and calming that heart down. And the children now, you can see them holding on to their hearts whilst I'm doing the sessions, because they can physically feel everything just slowing down. And also they Relaxed Kids look at self-belief and confidence and working on talking about yourself positively, which was something that was core with my son. Something he still struggles with now is having belief in himself and thinking that he's good enough, because he wasn't good enough in his eyes for his biological family, for the people that adopted him. And then it took a while for him to trust us that he was good enough for us. And then meditation, which I love. I rave on about meditation all the time. Children's meditation is amazing. It's basically telling them a story to relax their body, and we do that anyway as parents. We just forget sometimes that the basics that we do can have such a profound effect on them. So looking at all of these steps that Relaxed Kids did, I was like, this could help my son massively. I mean, I need to teach him to be in that state, but to get down to relaxing within an hour. So I did the training, I stuck it on a credit card, I worked out how I was going to pay for it later, like we all do when we're passionate about something. You're like, I'll just work it out, it's fine. And that's what led me to Relaxed Kids. And I was really doing it to find a different way to teach my son to relax. And I love anything a bit out there, a bit woo, a bit spiritual. As we've been on our journey, he would have been with us 4 years this July, actually. I found out he's quite a spiritual person naturally himself. He was talking about chakras last night and he wanted a massage. Yeah, I know. So naturally, and he loves a bit of Reiki as well. Apparently he can see lots of colours when I do Reiki on him. So naturally, we've actually bonded over Relaxed Kids. And from there, I actually just thought I'd do a couple of Saturday sessions, which then grew to 2 Saturday sessions, which then grew to doing one-to-ones with other children in their home, which then grew to actually working in school. So something that I did to train myself to help my son relax actually then started to become a business. And I was doing this alongside my corporate job. And I ended up it was a very natural parting of ways, and the business was changing anyway, and my friend was moving on to a different job, the guy that ran the company. And I said, I'm going to do this as a full-time job. And anybody who's self-employed knows that, you know, you could be full-time 1 month, and then you could be working 20 hours the next month.
Wow, adaptation at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I did. So actually now my son helps me with the sessions. Whilst we do the online sessions, he helps me with them. When we go to the classes, sometimes helps me with them. It's not, your mum being a teacher isn't always, you know, the best thing when you've got other children there as well. So we do it on more of a one-to-one basis. And what we've done is Relax Kids now is just a part of our life. If he can see that I'm getting stressed, he comes up and he's like, breathe, mummy, breathe with me, look into my eyes. I learned a lot about, you are a reflection. Your children are sponges. You are a mirror. If you are breathing fast, they will breathe fast. If your heart is beating really quickly and you're hugging them, they will feel that. So actually, you need to relax with them and be calm with them. So I do, and I did it at the Mother Hub, I do sessions with parent and child as well, so that the parents can actually learn these techniques, because I have these kids for an hour a week maximum, and they go away buzzing and loving it and nice and calm and relaxed. But it's weaving that into every part of your daily life.
And I think that's what I definitely try and say about my classes, is that it's not come along for an hour once a week. It's actually teaching you a tool to implement into your life. And that's exactly what you do, but for an older section, older children rather than babies. And I think things are really shifting and changing, especially in the last kind of decade. And you know, we talk a lot about mental health, and we talk a lot about kind of this generation, our generation kind of struggling the most with mental health. And I think the only way that really changes is teaching these tools and techniques for children to be able to cope with
and for it being more natural for them, because when I was younger, so even at the age of 14, 15, I was into meditation at the time, tapes. We didn't even have CDs then. I used to love going down paths and getting my incense sticks. And I was seen as a little bit strange doing that at that age. Whereas now, and this is what I find amazing, I have so many parents messaging me saying, oh, my child taught me, I do massage as well within the sessions. So I do peer massage, so they massage each other. And we talk a lot about consent as well, about having hands placed on you, about giving permission for that, and having the kind of autonomy to say, no, I don't want you to place your hands on me. So I have some children that do the massage, some that don't, but self-massage. And I have some parents saying, my child gave me a massage the other night, it was lovely. Or we did this really nice breathing exercise when she could see that I was getting a little bit stressed. Or she's been looking in the mirror saying, I am beautiful, I am unique. And the children now are actually teaching the adults. And I mean, and that brings it full circle for me, is that my son taught me how to get back in touch with my spirituality. So now I meditate every single day. I used to, it stopped, life got crazy, I had a child, I was working, I was trying to work out how to balance it all, and he's now kind of brought it back into my life. I get to meditate, I get to do my stretches, and I see doing the sessions as a bit of therapy as well. And also for us, it's a nice bonding experience, and it's something that we just do every day. It's everywhere in our house, you know. We have the affirmation cards up, I've got my meditation pillow down there, we've got our Hoberman sphere that we use to like do, we sometimes kick it around and throw it up in the air, because most people don't really know what they're for, but I use it for breathing exercise.
Yeah, me too. I was trying to see if I've got mine next to me.
Yeah, mine's just down there. I've got a little set up in the living room at the moment, so it's always there. So it's come full circle, you know. He's now teaching me and has helped me realize how I should be, and that in turn is helping him too. I'm a lot calmer, I'm a lot more relaxed. Don't get me wrong, I'm still stressed a lot, and you know, we aren't perfect mums, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be that, however we parent, or however our parenting journey has got to where we are today. But you know, a message that I'd like to say to people is that everybody's journey is different, and it is, and how you navigate that is completely individual to you. And hopefully what I can do with Relax Kids is say, so I have a lot of parents that come to me whose children have ADHD, they might be autistic, they might have low self-esteem, they might have issues with maybe food, they may have big issues, you know, slight agoraphobia, they don't like leaving the house. And I don't focus on those problems. I'm not a therapist, but what I can do is give those children the tools. They have their own toolkit of how to cope with those big emotions, because we could go into why and how they're doing it, and they need that, you know, that's what therapists are for. What I can do is say, actually, when you're feeling this, this is what you can do to help you feel better. And they teach their parents this as well, and their parents say, oh wow, okay, there is a different way now, and we are more open to kind of seeing that there is a different way to doing this.
And I think it's amazing as well, isn't it, because similar to you, I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't become a mother. And it's
Exactly.
like, we've got them to thank, or like your own journey.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you know, your son, if you didn't get your son there, and maybe did go for a baby girl,
yeah,
you know,
exactly,
it might not be where you are right now and doing what you are, which I definitely always feel when I talk to you is your life's purpose. Like, it really does come from the heart. And
100%.
And I definitely think, like, if I didn't go through journeys in my pregnancy and early postnatal, then I definitely wouldn't do what I do now, or I wouldn't do it with as much love and feeling of it. I might think, oh, that's a brilliant idea, but I don't think I would have stuck at it, or really done as much as I have.
When you can see that it's working and that it's helping, and you are proof. So now my son is in a position where he's the violence is gone, that stopped completely. He still will always, I think, have some type of attachment issue, some kind of self-confidence issues, and we also have him in therapy as well, because I'm a big believer that there are different solutions for different things, and I am not the solution for everything. I need an expert to come in and tell me, but I can help with those calming tools that he might need to help him get from here to here as well.
Oh, Sian, I could talk to you all day.
I know, and I would talk forever as well, and I'm not gonna
I'm like, oh, I could just sit here all day. I kind of do need a parent, but
same.
But yeah, we could just do this. But I just want to ask you a couple of questions back. So if you had one thing that you'd like to say to someone starting their adoption journey, at the very start of it, what would you tell them?
I would say build yourself a group of adopters or potential adopters that can support you on your journey, because however kind and loving your family and friends are, and I'm very lucky, I've got an amazing support network around me, and they've always been fantastic, nobody really understands your journey if they're not in it. So I'm still close, and I'm still friends with a lot of the people that we trained with on our adoption journey. Amazing. They have all adopted. We still meet up with them. They still come to my son's birthday parties. We still chat online. They will get you. So if you're training, keep in touch with those people. If you've adopted, get in touch with other adopters. Maybe avoid the Facebook pages. They're not always the best things to go on.
Fine line. A fine line, whether they can be helpful or really detrimental. But,
so build yourself a support network of other adopters.
Get your tribe, which is what we need in parenting. And it's just a tribe that gets you, isn't it? And they won't
judge if you're saying that your child is being an asshole that day.
But judgment free, that's what you need, isn't it? I think that's perfect. And if you could sum up motherhood in one word, what would it be?
I would, well, I don't want to say anything negative, but I also want to be really honest.
Yeah, be honest.
I would say motherhood for me was hard.
Yeah.
wasn't, I thought I would be an earth mother instantly, and it didn't happen like that. So I would say mother, if I could sum up my motherhood journey, it was hard, really hard, but there's an end.
Yeah.
And the end is having this beautiful child who you can see has developed into an awesome, caring, empathetic, spiritual person who just is just full of love and joy for you. And I can't imagine him even not being here. But the journey has been hard and wonderful.
And I think everybody can relate to that, whether being on an adoption journey or not.
Yeah, and everyone knows I'm really brutally honest
Yeah.
about my journey and how I found it. And for me, it wasn't instant gratification or love. It was something that had to develop over time, definitely.
Oh, Sian, thank you so
No
much
problem.
for sharing your journey. And what I'll do is I will pop a link in the comments to your page, so if anybody wants to kind of give you a follow and learn about more about what you do, that would be amazing. But thank you so
thank
much,
you.
love.